Okay.
Okay,
It's
you're
recording
good.
now. You're all set to go.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And welcome to the June 12th, 2025 Connecticut Paid Leave Board of Directors meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is 9:04 a.m. Amber, can you please take attendance?
Sure. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. Ava Bermuda Zimmerman,
Present.
Isha Canada,
Present.
Adrian Cochran. I don't believe Adrian has joined us yet. Andrea Comer,
Present.
Ellen McKitterick,
Present.
Eleanor Michael,
Present.
David Salazar Austin,
Present.
Mike Soltis,
Present.
Molly Weston Williamson,
Present.
Holly Williams. I do believe Holly had a conflicting meeting this morning, but I will circle back in just a moment. Justin Zartman.
Present.
Thank you. Janae and Melissa will not be joining us this morning, but we do have a quorum. And has Holly joined us yet? No, not yet, but we do still have a quorum. Thank
All
you.
right, Amber, did you call Sheila? I know she's not here, but did you call her?
I may have skipped over her, but she will not be joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Sheila Hummel. She is not with us this morning. Thank you.
Okay, great. And I would like to welcome Melissa Gibran to the board. I'm not sure if Melissa's able to join us today, but she is officially a new member of the board. And I would also like to thank the members of the public for joining us this morning. All right, let's kick it off with a review of the May 8th, 2025 meeting minutes. Are there any corrections or discussion?
Move to approve the May 8th, 2025 meeting minutes.
All right, thank you so much, Mike. May I have a second?
I'll second. Justin. This is Justin.
Great, thank you, Justin. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? And any abstentions today? All right, the motion carries. Thank you. Next up, we have Spring Group. Spring Group, could you please provide the quarterly actuarial report?
Good morning, everyone. I can just people sharing. I can share my screen.
You're all set for sharing, Harindra.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So the purpose of my part of the presentation here is to talk about the 3 quarters of financials. So the year-to-date financials for the first 3 quarters, starting July 2024 through March 2025. Talk about the experience year-to-date. So jump right in. Okay. So overall, net activity for the period, for this 9-month period, was $19.9 million. Positive. That compares to previously estimated of 13.4 million for the same 9-month period. Okay, so we started off at 628.7 million. Then that's the fund balance at the beginning of the period, net of outstanding contributions and claim payments. Again, these numbers are all on an incurred basis. After accounting for all of the activity during this time period, we ended up the period as of March 31st at 648.6 million. Okay, this represents about 1% higher than the prior projection, which was presented back in March. Overall, what was driving those results is slightly higher contributions compared to what we had projected, slightly higher investment income, and also slightly lower incurred claims compared to what was projected. Other expenses are about the same. So overall, looking at these results compared to the target funding metrics, we are below those. So the fund position remains strong. The comment I'll make is that our claims continue to trend higher overall. If you think about it over the long term. So as a trend, we are tending upwards with some of these metrics. And in particular, the metric that compares adverse losses over 1 year compared to the net fund balance. That one, we're at 0.4 to 1, which is still lower than our target of 0.5 to 1, but we are trending upwards, and that's getting closer to the target. So ideally, we want to be less than that metric, and so we do meet across the board based on our current funding metrics. We do meet the funding levels. Okay. Move on to the next page. This page provides a graphical illustration similar to prior quarters of what we of the same numbers. Overall, you see a fund balance of 628.7 million at the start of the period, and increase in revenue. So these are the contributions as well as the investment income of in total of 381 million. Expenses, so claims plus other expenses of 361 million. That reduces the fund, which leaves us at 648.6. The numbers on the right are the prior projection in a similar fashion. I won't go through any detail at this point, but we left it in the materials similar to prior quarters for your review. And this page provides the full year projection. So we have 9 months, but we do like to provide a full year update to the fiscal year results. So our prior projection was that we would end the year off at 642.8 million. We did have some positive experience in this last quarter, but we elected or opted to keep projection for the full year at the same level to be conservative. In particular, knowing that we may have some higher claims activity during this last quarter. So overall, no changes to the annual projection based on this additional quarter's results. Okay, so that really is the end of my prepared material. I'll open it up for questions.
Virendra, could you just go back to the slide that talk about the incurred claims? Can you just explain about how we revised the anticipated claims? So this is not low claims, this is lower than the revised claims?
Yes, so in December, we took a more detailed review. So we, as part of the annual work that we do, which again, we're about to kick off now, we take a detailed look at the claims experience and update the assumptions. And these assumptions are incidents, claims incidents, the duration of the claims, those types of assumptions. Because we were seeing an increase in activity when we looked at it about a year ago, we also decided to take another look at it in December. So, roughly November and December of last year as well. So we did a more detailed review of the claims and updated the numbers at that point as well. And then every quarter, we continue to monitor the actual experience relative to what was projected, and we decide, in addition to that, to make adjustments to our projections based on what we're seeing with the actual experience as well.
All right, thank you so much, Virendra, for that presentation. Are there any other questions? Hearing none, thank you so much.
Yep.
Our next agenda item is Walter. Walter, can you please provide the fund recovery update?
Of course. Thank you so much, Eleanor.
Thank you.
We can see your screen.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And all right. Thank you and good morning. So here are some updates on our continued fund recovery notices.
Walter, can you put that in slideshow mode, please? So it's just a little bigger.
Oh, you see the other screen. Okay. Let me, my apologies. Uh, are you seeing the slideshow now?
Yeah, but it's a little smaller now because we see the next slide coming up in addition to the main slide.
Okay, I seem to be having some issues.
You know what? Go back to your first screen, please.
There we go.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Sorry about that. They seem to be reversed on the numbering this morning. So the problem of having multiple screens. All right. So for those of you who have been at these fund recovery updates, we implemented in Q1 of 2025 our notices for those employers who are either missing a quarterly contribution payment, or both. Our Q1 of 2025 notices were sent out in early May. Here are some updates that we have as of the conclusion of May. We've now sent 9 quarters of notices. That results in us having sent out 156,760 notices for 59,945 unique employers for our 9 reporting quarters of Q1 of 2023 all the way through Q1 of 2025. Since we've begin issuing our notices, we've had payments remitted for over 22,311 employers in the amount of $7,364,568. And this is across all 9 quarters of our notices. We've had 12,321 unique employers pair notices. So this means some of our employers have received 1 to possibly up to 9 notices so far. We've seen the largest volume of our employers and contributions among our Q1 of 2023 notices, and that is in our 2023 number here, in which we've received 3,210,221 in principal, 817,829 in penalty, and 135,587 in interest. To date, we've received over $5,738,086 in outstanding contribution principal, $1,439,966 in penalties, and then $186,515 in interest. Another impact of those notices going out into the community is that we've been continuing to get responses from employers and update employer accounts who maybe were enrolled in error or no longer have any Connecticut employees. And to date, we've updated 28,322 employer accounts in our system to either mark as closed or not having any Connecticut employees any longer. We continue to work directly with those employers through our case management system, but we've also been successful in continuing to work with our partner agencies like Connecticut Department of Labor, Connecticut Department of Revenue Services, and those third-party administrators that represent those employers remitting payroll. And through that partnership, we've been able to update 48% of our business status updates in our accounts. To date, we waived 64,618 notices for 32,291 unique employers in our system. Additionally, as of January of 2024, we did start working with a fund recovery vendor. And as of the end of May, we've sent 64,726 notices to our fund recovery vendor, TSI, for 21,010 unique employers. And now I will move on to the next slide so we can see a breakdown of these notices. Here we have a quarter by quarter breakdown of our notices issued and the status of them. We look at the left, move to the right, we have our oldest to our newest. The purple represents those that have been closed, and the blue represents those that are still open in our system. We can see that we have a largest volume of those closed notices in 2023. Q1 of 2023, we have closed 19,442. Q1, 12,503, and so on. Of those 2023 notices, we see that 72% of the notices issued have been closed in our system, either waived, receiving a payment, and 28% are still open. And we can see the quarters that have the most open notices are those recent quarters. We do place a quarter with TSI, our collection agency, fund recovery vendor, after trying to collect on it internally for 6 months. And then they are able to provide some additional outreach to that community where we may have been unable to reach them. They can also scour other state resources, websites, agencies to give us back closures, things like that, that help us clean up our system. And here is a quarter by quarter breakdown. Moving to the next slide, we can see a overall breakdown. So of our notices issued in total, 41% of those notices have been waived. 13% of those notices created have been paid in full. That equates to 54% of our overall notices being closed in our system. Additionally, we have 10% of the notices issued still open with Connecticut Paid Leave. Those are for Q1 of 2025. And then we have 36% of our notices open with our fund recovery vendor, some still in a penalty placeholder status and some with some partial payments in which the employer paid contribution, but not penalty and interest. And now I will talk about our relationship with our fund recovery vendor, TSI or Transworld. So we established our relationship in January of 2024, placed our first placement files with them. And as of the end of May, we've sent 64,726 notices for 21,010 unique employers. TSI provides those additional services on our notices that help us find the debtors who are non-responsive. They also scour public records, address verifications, etc., to send those employers back to us so that we can either work with them on their dispute of notice or help them through that payment process. Of those notices sent to TSI, we've received payment on 3,897 of those notices after placing with TSI, and that totals to $1.361 million. Additionally, we've waived 15,255 of those notices after working with the employer or those public records to confirm that those accounts no longer have Connecticut employees, and we've closed in our system. To date, we've closed 29.59% of those notices placed to TSI and working to resolve them. And at the beginning of June, we placed our most recent quarter, Q4 of 2024, with TSI, and we sent them 10,668 notices. And I will continue to keep this board updated on the progress of those notices. The other work we do with our employers is work cases submitted by that employer when they have a question or they want to confirm their account in our system. As of the end of May, we've received 24,073 inquiries or cases in our system since our inception. And as of the end of May, we've additionally closed 23,818 of those cases, leaving 258 still open, being reviewed by our finance team. The largest response from our notices is from our first 2 quarters after going live, where we've received 5,304 notices and then 4,315. And then we've seen a trend down in our most recent quarters as we enter what I'll call a steady state type of environment from our case responses. And then below you can see a breakdown by quarter of our finance team activity. We're currently averaging overall 241 new cases per week, while being able to action 617 cases per week or 129 per day. But as you can see by this chart, reading left to right, we can see an overall trend down in those averages of cases submitted to us each quarter. As the inquiries to our system have lessened, it's allowed us to work on our other some other priorities like providing some follow-up to our third-party administrators, working to additionally clean up other accounts in our system, and then enhancing our processes. And lastly, the other byproduct of our notices and submitting cases to us is we've been working with the community to add context to those accounts in our system. We've added 4,750 contacts to 4,410 employer accounts after those notices went out that we didn't have prior to those notices. So we continue to work to provide the outreach, send them back to us, and then we can send them additional communications when they're in our system. And looking at our quarter by quarter case count, we can see a quarterly progression down of the responses from the notice outreach. I think a bar graph better represents than a number. We can see we started in Q3 of 2023 with our cases. The blue bar represents the highest number, the cases created in our system, and then the purple is the amount closed. We can see we started our first 2 quarters with higher amounts and a steady trend down quarter by quarter. While Q2 2025 is still open, we're at the end of May. It will continue to the end of June. We'll update this after, but we do not anticipate receiving too many more that would be inconsistent with the trend here. And with the trend down in cases, it's also allowed us to do some other outreach to the community, which is ensure that we get those registered accounts that should be in our program enrolled. And these last 2 slides will show that. We've been providing outreach to those accounts who are enrolled in Connecticut DOL for unemployment filings. We've been vetting that data, identifying those employers that we feel should be in our program and are not yet registered, and providing outreach to that community. January of 2025, we sent out the first batch of our mailers for 1,455 mailers. And then in April, we sent out an additional 2,393. To date from those 2 mailers, we've received 555 accounts registered in our program, which didn't exist prior. And then the other item is some data cleanup. In sending out cases, we've identified some employers may have been enrolled either in error in DOL with the wrong FEIN or in our system with an incorrect FEIN. And we've worked to clean up that data. 68 accounts in the Connecticut Paid Leave system, and in scouring.
Walter, we lost you for a second. We can't hear you after the word scour. I don't know why. No. So I'm not sure if your audio unclicked.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can. Yep.
Okay. Wonderful internet in my neighborhood today. Great. So we are scouring the DOL records. We identified that who existed previously no longer exists. Those filings have been amended. The FEINs corrected. DOL has worked with them to update 21 of those accounts. And the last thing to ensure our fund solvency is contributions paid. People have enrolled with us, registered, remitted contributions totaling $441,943 thus far. We've had a 17% response rate from our mailers. And our last slide here will show a breakdown of all years that those contributions were paid for. We can see that the reporting periods those contributions were remitted for, we have received 46,858 going back to 2021, 36,377 for 2022, 59,459 for 2023, and our biggest response from those most recent years with 157 for 2024 and 141K for 2025. We continue to provide outreach to this community. We want to ensure our fund solvency. And then in July of 2025, we look to send our next batch of mailers for 962 new accounts that are registered in the Connecticut Department of Labor system that are not in ours. And I will pause here intentionally rather than my audio going out. So if anyone has any questions. Okay.
Walter, I have a question. This is
Yes.
Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, thank you for your presentation. What happens after we've exhausted our efforts to collect? TSI has exhausted its efforts to collect. And the employer, for whatever reason, who has an obligation to pay, is not enrolling, is not cooperating, is not collecting. The next step.
Yep, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see everyone's face. We are entering that next step now. We haven't fully exhausted TSI's abilities. They do continue to find it, but we are verifying our litigation process to further go after those employers. We find with collection agencies, they've given us a very small likelihood of collecting on debts after giving it to them. We've already exceeded that percent. But most of the debts they get have already aged a year, 2 years. We're giving it to them pretty fresh, 6 months old. So we know we don't want to write off contribution. That isn't something for policy. We're going to continue to go after, and then we're pursuing our litigation process on those that continue to not pay us.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I think Molly had her hand up next.
Sure. Thank you so much for this update. That was really helpful. And thank you. I think Mike had one of my questions as well. I was going to ask, and this, I think this actually may be more of a John question than a Walter question, but are we getting claims submitted from workers who are at employers that have not paid in? Because that seems like that's both another source of information about what's happening, but also almost certainly there are some workers who are effectively being denied leave because they don't know the program exists because their employer is not following the rules. So I wanted to see how we were sort of connecting those dots.
Hi, Molly. Thanks. So our policy is that we hold the employee harmless, and we would accept a claim from the employee and pursue with Walter's team, engaging the employer to recover any contributions that they were that they had not remitted.
Is that happening? Like, are we getting claims of that kind?
It does. There's a relatively small number of those claims. However, it has happened, and that is what the process is at this point, that we do hold the employee harmless. We inform the employer of their obligation and kind of transfer it to Walter's team for them to pursue any registration and collection activities.
And we have followed up with those employers. In addition to sending some of these registered in DOL not in our system letters, we have sent some personalized correspondence to them and provided them those resources to get registered.
And I'll add, they're usually pretty responsive, Molly, when we send that out. In fact, I remember the first time it happened, the employer was so aghast that they were not in compliance. They sent everything, including back contributions, like within a week or two. So yeah, so there is a process and it's working.
All right, and Ava.
Just kind of piggyback off of the question here that Mike had. So if in the next steps we are pursuing some version of litigation, but we don't necessarily want to go there, and we have TSI, through the process, how much are we spending in staff time and energy and cost to try to retrieve this money in comparison to the money that we actually get in return?
So the short answer, Ava, is that the money coming in definitely exceeds the costs that we pay to TSI. I could stop now if you want, but but that's a short answer.
That's a solid answer right there.
Okay, I mean, the longer answer is we pay a percentage to TSI, right? So, and then we also actually all have our staff costs and things like that. But as Walter has demonstrated, through his numbers, the fund recovery effort has been a big success. And
Yeah, it's great.
I'll point out a couple of those numbers when I go over the financial presentation in a few minutes to you.
One add-on question. The success numbers, is that comparable to other TSI fishing expeditions here? Are we an anomaly? To me, I see that, I'm like, my goodness, I had no idea we could be that successful, and you just, start asking and finding people. Or are they very good at their job? Is it because it's paid leave? Are there variables that we don't know? Is this good? Because it looks good on screen.
Well, right. So I will say that, well, first of all, I will give kudos to Walter and his team for their active follow-up, and I will give kudos to TSI. When we first explored the option of an outside vendor, the general consensus was the success rate of any kind of response was 5%. And so, as Walter pointed out, we're getting more than 5% in contributions. And if you add on the fact that we're getting people responding saying, hey, I'm not in business anymore, I don't have any connected employees, et cetera, that response rate goes up. So judging that as a metric, yes, it's been successful. As Walter also pointed out, we send the money to TSI in about 6 months, not a year or two later. So it's fresher. So we're able to follow up with employers sooner, and that makes for a more, you get a better success rate with that.
Thank you. Keep up the good work. That's awesome.
Thanks so much. Thanks for the good questions. And thank you, Walter, for the presentation. I just have one last question. Is a takeaway from the fact that the incidents of non-compliance have been declining that, employers in the state are more comfortable with the program now? I'm just wondering what we can conclude from that.
I would say they are definitely more aware of the program. And that's why you'll see like the number of notices in the beginning was high. Before we instituted penalties and interest, we were advising employers to become compliant with the program before penalties and interest went into effect. Some of them did, some of them didn't. When we started sending out penalty notices, a lot of them were like, oh, I guess you're serious about that now. So they tended to respond more when they got a penalty notice, and we started getting contributions and or fact corrections in terms of whether they had covered employees or not. So since that initial rush, it's gone down. There's always a group of employers you're following up on, but after that initial rush, yes, there's more awareness of the program to be compliant with the program. We also use our outreach efforts, Jessica and her team, especially in the beginning, to let employers know, because it was a new program back then. So we want to let employers know that, hey, for most employers, it wasn't optional. So you had to be compliant with the program, and we had success rate of that too. So all these factors go into place as where we are today, that the amount of notices we're sending out now compared to what we were sending out a year or two ago has decreased.
Excellent. That's great news. Thank you so much. If there are no further questions, we will move on to Maddie Granata with the legislative update. Maddie, congratulations on making it to the end of the long legislative session.
Thank you. Right back at you. So, okay. Okay, great. Folks can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Walter, I did have the same issue as you did, so just validating that, but okay, I have a brief legislative update for everyone. As you all know, the 2025 legislative session adjourned last Wednesday. As mentioned, over the last few months, the authority did not put forward an agency legislative proposal this year. However, we did monitor several bills that would impact our operations really closely, and we provided information as well as support or opposition where necessary throughout the session. One item that we followed very closely and worked with the Senate and House labor chairs on is coverage for certain school employees under Connecticut paid leave and Connecticut FMLA. Sections 234 through 237 of House Bill 7288, this year's bond bill, incorporated language from Senate Bill 1427, which I think I've mentioned here a few times over the last several months. Aaron testified in support of Senate Bill 1427 in March, and while that bill did not pass, its language was fully incorporated into the bond bill, which did pass. That means that effective October 1st, 2025, the law now will cover employees of public school operators in non-public elementary and secondary schools under Connecticut paid leave and Connecticut FMLA if their position does not require a certification under Chapter 166. So this will include paraeducators, cafeteria workers, bus drivers, library aides, and other job titles. I do want to note that it does not include public school teachers. Their coverage will not change under Connecticut paid leave, and they'll continue to have the ability to collectively bargain to participate. The language provides a clear definition of what is considered a public school, and it defines public school operator to explicitly include local or regional boards of education, magnet schools, and charter schools. It also allows the authority to create a policy for determining the base period and base weekly earnings for school employees, taking into account that school employees may opt to be paid a little bit differently than some other workers, especially during the summer months. This is something that Michael and his team will work on developing in the coming weeks, and we'll seek public comment on. So we've already started, getting ready for this change. We're putting together plans for implementation, including outreach to the State Department of Education, private schools, unions, etc. We're also working on developing rules, like I just mentioned, for validating who is and who isn't covered, as well as how to determine their work and salary schedules for these workers to calculate their base period and their base weekly earnings. So we'll be providing, I'm sure, more updates on this in the coming months, especially as we approach October 1st. I'll also provide the board a more complete legislative report in the next few weeks that will provide a fuller picture on everything that we monitored this year. So, yep, that's all I have.
Great. Thank you so much, Maddie. Any questions for Maddie on that legislative update? Hearing none. Thank you so much. Moving on to committee reports. Mike, can you please provide the policy and personnel report?
Yes, our committee meets every 2 months. We did not meet last month, and our next meeting is July 1st.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. And Molly, can you please provide the outreach and engagement report?
Sure. The committee met in May, right after the May board meeting, and heard updates on what's happening with outreach from Jessica and the podcast from Nancy, and a legislative update, which you mostly just heard. And we will meet again in July.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Holly, can you provide the finance and audit committee report, please?
Sure. The committee met at the end of May, and the spring group provided the actuarial quarterly update, which you saw earlier today in the meeting. And we also received a review of the regularly reported financials, which Dave is going to walk through for the board right now.
Thank you, Holly, and good morning, everybody. We will see if technology works for me today. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. All right. So we're going to discuss the results through April today. The month of April was a pretty typical month. Our activity for the month was just over $4 million. We had a $358,000 positive variance Typical expenses for the month were for payroll and related expenses, the contact center, outreach, no real anomalies there. The activity, year-to-date activity is over $4.5 million. That is a negative $788,000 variance, but I will remind everybody that we did not transfer $5 million the previous quarter from the contribution fund because we had enough money in operating reserve. So that's why there's a somewhat negative variance. I do want to spend a few seconds addressing the question Ava had before about are all these efforts paying for themselves? And I said yes. And so just to illustrate that with numbers, our fund recovery penalty year to date is almost $555,000. The fees we've paid out are less than that, $122,000. And by the way, this isn't even counting the contributions or the interest we got, which go into the contribution fund, which I'll get to in a couple of minutes. But the penalties are definitely covering the fund recovery fees that we're paying out. Bond money this month, $56,000 for our fund recovery efforts. That was a positive variance of almost $44,000. And year to date, we've used over $875,000 of that bond money, which has over $124,000 positive variance. And we expect that positive variance to go through to the end of the fiscal year, which is in about half a month, if you can believe it already. Bond money that remains available to the authority is just over $1.5 million. So we'll be using that for fund recovery and any other system projects that we need in the coming months. Moving on to contribution activity for the month of April. April is a month when contributions come in. They're due quarter end. There's a penalty-free grace period for the month after. So most employers tend to pay during that penalty-free grace period. So our activity for the month was $101 million. That was resulted in a negative almost $2.9 million variance. The driver of that, as we've been saying for the past few months now, has been an increase in benefits paid over what we budgeted, which resulted in over a $5.7 million negative variance. We did pay out over $35.5 million of benefits this month. That is an $8.9 million run rate per week. That's slightly up from $8.8 million the prior month, but that's been pretty typical of the run rate we've been having recently. Like I mentioned, contributions came in this month. They were almost $141.5 million for the month. That created a positive budget variance of $2.8 million for the month. We did have a negative variance for investment income this month of $122,000, not because the interest rate is lower, it's still at 4.4%, but because benefits paid were higher than we anticipated, the fund base was lower than what we budgeted. So there's less money to earn interest on. And so that's why this number, which is typically positive, was negative for the month. Having said that, year to date, it's almost at $3.7 million and will be positive by the end of the year. Year-to-date activity is just over $100.3 million. There is a $31.3 million compared to budget. Again, that's because benefits paid are higher than what we budgeted, but every other line is better than budget, and we anticipate that to be the case through year end. Since we just did get contributions for the most recent quarter, I wanted to share with everybody how those compare to other periods, in particular the same period last year. So this chart shows contributions by quarter. From left to right, it's first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. Also from left to right are older years and the green column is the current year. So for the most recent quarter, the first quarter, our contributions were $143.5 million. That is $5.2 million or 3.8% more than the same quarter last year, which is the yellow column to the left of it. So that's been about the increase on average, about 4% from last year. So we are seeing that trend continue. As you can see from this graph, the first quarter is always the highest, at least historically it's been. That's because the first quarter is typically for a lot of companies when bonuses are paid or wage increases go into effect and things of that nature. So that's why it tends to be so much higher than the rest of the quarters. And then you see the rest of the quarters, it goes down quarter by quarter. And that's because as more employers meet the FICA cap, then which is also the cap to make contributions into paid leave, there's less of those employees, so then there's less contributions coming in. And so we've seen that trend since the paid leave started, and so we expect that trend to happen again in the current year as it has in prior years. The contribution fund itself, its balance was over $666.4 million as of the end of April. A quick preview for the month of May. Again, it was a typical, well, actually, it was a typical month in terms of the type of activity. We had over $1.3 million of expenses. That's higher than usual because we had 3 pay periods in the month of May. That happens typically about 4 times a year because we're paid every 2 weeks. So every once in a while, you get that 3rd pay period. And so that bumped up the operating expenses for the month. Benefit payments were just under $44.5 million. The run rate for May was again $8.9 million. So we are seeing that amount remain steady more or less at that amount. And then contributions went back down to $664,000. And investment income was at $2.3 million because and that was higher than last month because we got most of the contributions the prior month. So the investment income went up. As far as the end of the fiscal year, we are projecting $1.6 million of activity. That's about $250,000 less than what we had budgeted. But again, remember, we did not transfer the $5 million over. So that's why it's negative, which is not that much when you consider we are better than budget by over $4.4 million in terms of expenses. And the drivers for that continue to be payroll being less than budgeted. And the significant driver of that was because the pension rate came in lower than what was budgeted, and positions are being filled later than the date that they were budgeted. And the contribution projection, as Harindra had indicated earlier, the projection from his end hasn't changed. A lot of those numbers flow into this. So our number hasn't changed. We're still expecting to be at just over $14.5 million at the end of the fiscal year. That is less than what we budgeted, but it is net positive for the year. And I do want to point out that we do expect our fund recovery numbers to come in at over $1.6 million. So that includes the contribution and the interest. So again, that is more. That is obviously more than what we are expecting the estimated expense to be for fund recovery fees, which we're expecting to be at $140,000 for the year. So that's what's happening through the month of April and a preview of May and where we expect to be at the end of the fiscal year. I'll take any questions at this time if anybody has any.
Thank you so much, Dave. Any questions for Dave? All right, thank you again. Seeing none, we'll move on to Aaron and the CEO report.
Thank you so much. I wanted to just flag for you a continuous improvement opportunity that we've been working on. It's being led by Jess, but it involves representatives from each of our departments, and that is related to the Contact Us experience. So if folks, either employers, employees, other stakeholders have questions about the program, need to register their new business, need to figure out how to remit their contributions, and they don't get their answer directly from the website, they can contact us. We have been working with United Way since inception. They help us flag and respond to a lot of those questions. Some of the questions get automatically routed to members of our team. Sometimes they get escalated. And so it's been working, but it's an area where we know this is an opportunity for people to get information, and we want to make sure it's a good experience. So Virginia did some analysis for us earlier this year to assess whether people are using the right categories when they select their topic for questions. And 50% of the time they're not, which has some impacts on the routing of the Contact Us inquiries. So that led us to develop this working project where we're really taking apart every element of the Contact Us experience, working to identify who is asking the questions, what kinds of questions they're asking, whether we can improve the information that we provide on the website so that they're not confused and they don't have to ask us the question, or can we give them a more curated experience so that by the time they ask the question, we know for sure what they're actually asking, and hopefully we can get the information from them as efficiently as possible. So this is an ongoing project. Again, it involves everybody, but it is something that we're really excited about because we think it will really improve that experience for everyone who's interacting with us. Also wanted to let you know, I've shared with some of you, we have a little bit of a baby boom going on with the authority. We will have 4 people out on childbirth and bonding leave by the end of the summer, which is a good percentage of our group. So to address that, we absolutely support our employees utilizing all of the time off that they have available to them in Connecticut, and we are trying to model good behavior for employers. So a few of the things that we're doing to make sure that the operations can continue while our folks are developing the next generation we've been doing some cross-training, we've been doing some advanced planning. We have brought in a temporary worker retiree, which is state speak for a state employee who recently retired. David Ward actually recently retired from DAS, the workers' comp unit. He's got great experience with vendor management and with claims and auditing. And so we are bringing him back at a incredibly great rate for us because we don't have to pay for his benefits. And he can work under Treasury laws for up to 120 days. And so he'll be helping the benefits team doing some of the AFLEC audits so that can continue. And then he can shift some of the work from the other folks so that they can shift and do some more of the escalations. So we're excited to have Dave on board. He's a great resource and we're really happy to have him. In the outreach team, these leaves are coinciding with the summer festival season. We go to a lot of events. And so it's a very busy time of year. So we brought in a seasonal worker, a young woman who recently graduated with a degree in public policy from UConn, has joined us. She'll be with us into the fall, and she's going to be supporting our efforts going to these events, but also doing some work on the outreach necessary to implement the legislation and some of the work associated with improving that Contact Us experience and sort of website review. So we seem to have tendency of hiring people who have the same names as other people at the agency. So this Madeline is joining Maddie on this effort. So those are some of the things that we are working on and some of the ways that we are supporting our staff in utilizing these benefits. And, summer is not a slow time for us. A lot is going on the fund recovery side, on the outreach side, and on the private plan side. So just wanted to let you know that we're continuing to work hard and happy to answer any questions you may have. See, Ava.
Unrelated to your report, I was curious to see how are the committee meetings going with the new frequency or lack thereof?
Right, great question. So finance continues to meet monthly. So that has continued unabated. I think on the policy side and on the outreach side, it does seem to be a good innovation. We are trying to be planful so that we know in advance what we need to ask for approvals, particularly on the policy side because of the public notice comment. So, for example, because policy and personnel will meet in July, but not August, Michael is already working on some of the policy language that we'll need to effectuate the legislation in October so that we have time to get everything done. So it requires some extra planning, but I think other than that, it seems to be going well. Committee members can certainly jump in if they disagree, but it seems people seem to like having some of their time off.
All right, thanks so much, Erin. Any other questions for Erin this morning? And congratulations to all the growing families within the authority. That's really exciting. All right, any old business today? Any new business? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to our executive session. So in a moment, I'll ask the board for a motion to enter executive session. Our reason for entering the executive session today is to enable the board to discuss the CEO's mid-year performance review. Before we have a motion, I have a few instructions. We need an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the voting members present at this meeting to go into this executive session. When entering the executive session, you will leave the Zoom meeting. You'll need to use the Microsoft Teams link that Stephanie sent with the agenda for the executive session, and our Zoom link will remain open for when we return. No voting is to occur during the executive session. When the session is over, close your Teams link and return to the regular meeting using the Zoom link on the agenda. When all board members have returned from executive session, our regular meeting will resume. Now, may I have a motion for the board to enter the executive session pursuant to CGS 1-206A, discussion concerning the appointment, employment, performance, evaluation, health, or dismissal of a public officer or employee.
So moved, as long as we have 2/3.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? All right, the motion carries. It is now 10:02 a.m. and we will go into the executive session. Thanks, everybody.
We do have this slide. We're just working on getting it up.
Do you see the slide, Amber?
No, we don't. Amber, do you have the slide? Maybe you can get it up if Stephanie's computer's not doing it. There we go. Thank you. Can you put it in slideshow mode?
I have, it's just not projecting that way. Looks like Zoom's having a lot of technical difficulties this morning. Let's try this.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you.
Steph, would you please keep an eye on the waiting room for when our members return?
All right. Thank you so much. We have now returned from executive session. It is 10:13 a.m. and the Board of Directors meeting is back in session. The executive session was the last item on our agenda today. So if there are no further questions or comments or nothing for the good of the order here, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
And we have a second. All right, perfect. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? And any abstentions? The motion carries. It is 10:14 a.m. and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day.
You
Thank
too.
you.